and the associated ills that threaten sustainable development in many communities island-wide. Community renewal interventions provide a platform for the coordination and enhancement of the delivery of public services to volatile and vulnerable communities. Consequently, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation has developed an urban renewal and development program as part of its mandate to strategically coordinate and implement urban renewal projects for the sustainable transformation of communities and towns across Jamaica. Regarding the foregoing, the Ministry will be working in tandem with members of Parliament as we progressively work to transform urban spaces. Therefore, I wish to advise the House that $4 million will be made available to all constituencies for the implementation of specific projects under Phase 1 of this urban renewal development program. The projects will be undertaken, must focus on infrastructure, and these projects, Madam Speaker, will be zinc fence removal and replacement with approved materials. We are changing the face of our communities to remove unsightly fencing, park upgrading and creation of small, what is called pocket parks, installation, replacement of street signs. Madam Speaker, the street signs must be with the approval of the municipal authority. And I know, Madam Speaker, it is now fashionable to put up signs at the entrances of communities, but this project is not designed to do that. This project is designed for street signs. It is for urban renewal, for communities where the street signs have been torn down or they have been worn out over time, to replace them. So, Madam Speaker, it's a very specific mandate for urban renewal. And of course, Madam Speaker, the paving of sidewalks and pathways in some communities, this is absolutely important. Madam Speaker, the Ministry is working to develop a specific program which will be in Phase 2 of this general urban renewal, which will focus on constituencies that have extensive urban areas. So in this first phase, all constituencies will benefit because all constituencies have some element of urban areas in them. But in the next phase, we will be seeking to focus, which is the mandate of this department in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, to focus exclusively on constituencies that have urban areas. Madam Speaker, recently I had the opportunity to tour with the member from Western St. Andrew, his constituency, and we have similar constituencies, and the member mentioned that he would appreciate an allocation to remove the maze of zinc fences in the areas. And Madam Speaker, we went back, we looked at the budget, we figured out what we can do, and we are now making, it is admittedly a small allocation. It is admittedly a small allocation, $4 million. But Madam Speaker, it can remove zinc fences from a significant stretch of roads, each, per constituency. In the second phase, we will have, as I say, greater focus and possibly greater allocations. The intention, Madam Speaker, is to target communities and transform them. That's what I'm saying, Madam Speaker. So the first part of the program, as all members are elected equally, we distribute the funds to all constituencies. But as we are targeting from a policy perspective, which is urban renewal, then only urban constituencies, that would be constituencies that have a significant area as urban. In the same way, Madam Speaker, that we wouldn't target some rural urban constituencies with agricultural assistance, for example. So, no, so you will get in the first round, member, but in the second round, unless you are able to point out to us an area that could be considered urban. So, Madam Speaker, it is always difficult to do these kinds of allocations because all MPs would want the assistance, and I genuinely understand that. So, Madam Speaker, no, we will do rural as well, but this one is under the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, under the Urban Renewal Department. Thanks for the advice. Madam Speaker, proposals. Madam Speaker, members of Parliament must submit a project proposal for outlining the location, rationale for selection, the estimated duration and the impact of the project. And these proposals are to be submitted to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation by Friday, the 14th of July, 2023. A letter will be circulated as is the usual practice, so you will know where to send your projects. The Ministry's Urban Renewal and Development Branch will provide technical assistance, including evaluation of project proposals and site assessments. All projects must be completed within budget and only commence after assessment is conducted and approvals granted. Madam Speaker, the transformation of the physical and built environment in communities play a key role in social and economic transformation. It improves quality of life, fosters inclusivity and social equity, encourages community engagement, supports economic development, and promotes sustainable practices. By creating environments that are accessible, functional, and aesthetically pleasing, communities can enhance social well-being, equity, and resilience. Madam Speaker, I look forward to the implementation of this project and the impact, the positive impact it will have on lives in urban communities.
Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think every MP would be pleased to have an additional $4 million to spend on the type of projects outlined here: zinc fence removal, park upgrading, community or street signs, and paving sidewalks and pathways. And we look forward to seeing what phase 2 will look like, the budget for it, and what types of activities will be permitted under it. As you know, Prime Minister, certainly, for example, in my constituency, we have a number of high-rise buildings, 3 different schemes, which were built many decades ago, and where the cladding around the staircases is collapsing, various other things which are affecting safety. And we really need to address those quickly, and I know you're working on that, so I want to thank you for that. But I'm sure, you know, for the urban MPs, there are many of us who have a lot of issues related to life in urban areas like that, which need to be quickly addressed. Not to say that the phase 2 project would be able to address those kind of problems, but there are many other things that I'm sure will be identified, and we look forward to seeing and hearing more about the phase 2 project. But, you know, we support zinc fence removal, and interesting to see how much one can deal with $4 million. But, you know, I'm sure that those who have their curtilages, their boundaries transformed from zinc to something more up-to-date, more visually appealing and safer, will be very grateful for it. So we are on board with this particular one, and thank you for thinking of the need to address this issue, having toured Western St. Andrew with my good colleague MP from that constituency. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, just a question to the Prime Minister. As with all the MPs, I believe that this is a welcome project and that it is more than needed. I don't think anyone could deny that. So I want to say it's well-timed and it's needed. I wanted to ask you, just in terms of the rollout, I know we're expecting a letter to do the details, but I'm sincerely hoping that this does not go the route of the $40 million road program, because I am totally unable to get any information about where we are, when we start, and all of that. No, I'm raising it. Madam Speaker, you would understand that I raise it because some people send me here, you know? And when they hear this big excitement in Parliament and they look and don't see me doing any roads at all and I can't tell them anything, then it seems as if I am derelict in my responsibility. And since this is the place where I come to lay those claims so that they are very clear, because they watch us, you know, on a Tuesday afternoon, they can actually see me talking to the Prime Minister to make sure that this program, which they are going to be anticipating, doesn't go the way of the 40 million, but more importantly also that there is some idea, even just simply idea, as to the scheduling of those road repairs.
Prime Minister, in relation to phase 2, you know, many of us could go to town on the submissions that we are likely to make. So perhaps if you give us some idea as to what the budget will be like right now. Very well, very well.
Madam Speaker, if I may. Prime Minister, first of all, congratulations on this urban renewal program. A question, you laid out a menu of projects that we could use. Will there be other on the menu so that members of Parliament who have creative ideas, for example, doing a mural in an urban space, if we could submit those for the approval of the unit, or the menu is hard and fast?
Last question. Town and Montego Bay, that is really what is classified in some policy statements as urban, based on how based on how some people define in terms of how persons are living, the kinds of dwellings, etc. I just want you to define what that is. And the second question is, when you remove the zinc fences, what are you proposing, or what are you proposing MPs should do? Because block and steel is expensive with concrete, and you will also have to take into consideration drainage. So you're talking about doing a long stretch of road when in fact that 4 million might just be able to do a few yards or a few chains. So I think we just need to be very realistic in here so that when it gets out, people are very, very clear on the parameters of what this program should look like. But it is a good program. I welcome the program. And I also want you to try and say to persons who are in the rural areas what that kind of renewal, since it's urban, would look like. So for example, if my constituency, for example, needs painting in the town of Claremont, or do I need to help a place in Parrytown, what could that be used for, since we might not have as much zinc as a facade in some areas, but people need zinc on the top of their roofs or may need zinc on their farms to help with chicken coops, etc. So everything can't be homogeneous is what I'm asking.
Thank you, members, for your questions. And the questions are very helpful in refining the program as you ask them. we do come to the Parliament with a definition of the program, but your experience, your insights, I will take them and try as best as possible to ensure that members of Parliament are accommodated, because our circumstances differ, and some differ significantly, and the objective is to help the constituency. All right, so let me start with the member for Southeast St. Anne. The definition that we go by wouldn't be the classification on the electoral side of things, because that would be a very narrow number of constituencies. What we go by would be, first of all, the existence of a rural township. So if you have a township in your constituency, that is considered to be an urban area. If you have, so almost all constituencies would have some form of an urban space. Then you would want to consider what is defined as urban under the various municipal acts. And then you would want to look at developments that have sprung up where they are on a grid in terms of the roads crossing each other, the density is high, and there would be common infrastructure, sewage, water, central infrastructure. And so that is what we're looking for. Now, you wanted to know that what could you do in your rural township, for example, with $4 million? The project facilitates and conceives that in a rural township, you may need to reinstate the sidewalks. Some rural townships still have drainage on the side where you may need to create that kind of drainage. So sidewalk drainage, that would be acceptable. You may need to reinstall, for example, road signs. That is accommodated. There may be some infrastructure that you want to look at, such as walls, that might be necessary for the beautification of the town. There may be someone with a private property, but the fencing is unsightly. The program does not specify block and steel. It does prefer the use of a concrete solution. So block and steel is one form of a concrete solution, but you could have a pour in place. You could have a combination of pour in place and other forms of fencing, including wood and metal. What we would want is for the structure to be sturdy and sustainable. So the department, the Urban Renewal Department, will work with you to come up with something that makes sense for your area and the budget that is there. We concede up front that you will not be able to do long stretches, but we want you to select impactful projects. So you would look very closely in your constituency to see how you can make an impact with the funds that have been given. Remember, we are stretching it by including all constituencies, but not all constituencies actually have a high level of urban areas that would qualify. Now, the member from St. Mary Western asked about whether or not the project definitions are fixed. In this phase, we thought it best to fix the project, because when the project types are too vague or too many, when they come for review by the Auditor General or even us in the PAAC, sometimes they raise questions about the impact of the project, the cost benefit of the spend. So we try to have definitions. Now you mentioned, member, you mentioned murals. In this phase, we're not contemplating murals. What we will do in the phase coming, we may contemplate that. But in this phase, we would want to focus on projects where the works can be objectively assessed. If you paint a mural, you can paint anything, and you may not be able to judge and assess the value of the mural relative to the work. So we want to try and avoid those issues. So we tend to want to approve works that can be objectively assessed, meaning that you want to draw a tape measure on it, and there's a set rate and a set measurement. There can be no argument about these matters.
Prime Minister, as you
not in good order at all, member.
Huh?
Not in good order at all, member.
I asked the Prime Minister to accede so I can. So we have no latitude?
No, the speaker is whom you would need to approach.
Okay, sorry. But in this case, because I'm not, it's not the standing order, I have to ask the Prime Minister.
I actually took the last question, and if you would like to have further clarification,
it's a clarification.
one would expect that you would address the speaker.
It's a clarification. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And you're correct, but I have to ask the Prime Minister if he mind on a point that he was discussing.
You may go ahead, member.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. But Prime Minister, so I agree that you have to pay careful attention to the monitoring and evaluation. Let me ask you, first of all, I want to thank you for the initiative and responding. But precisely because, as you recognize, it's a start, is there flexibility in the program to partner with other stakeholders, civil society, the church, in working to expand a program? And I gave an example. I just had a discussion with a sponsorship group that wants to help in a particular community. A program like this it's not big enough on its own to be very impactful, but together with that sponsorship group can really make a significant impact. So if I were to, identifying the project and defining it, identify the institution that wants to work with so that we can have a very impactful program in the same community and for the same purpose.
So, member, just to answer your question very quickly, I don't see why we would not be willing to partner with entities that have similar missions. The challenge, of course, is that we must be able to account for the funds that we have put in and what I have announced here in Parliament. So as long as those two parameters are not in any way compromised, in other words, the funds that we have allocated, we must be able to measure and account for it, and it must be used in the way in which we have defined it here. Outside of that, I wouldn't have any challenge. The ministry would be willing to look at a possible delay in implementation to allow for the coordination with an outside entity. But outside of that, the project should stick to what is announced here and be accountable for the funds. The question...
Madam Speaker, through you, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to remind the Prime Minister that he had not addressed the comments that I had made in terms of just the timing of the program and making sure that it's not announced now and months later.
No, I'm coming.
Oh, you're coming? Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Speaker, the member from Southwest St. Andrew, my sister and neighbor, pointed out that there are several projects which the government has announced, which funding has been approved for, but these projects have not yet been implemented. Madam Speaker, I thank the member for raising the issue because it is a concern on the minds of all MPs, and their constituents have been very vocal in demanding answers. Madam Speaker, the short answer is that we have 360 procurements that have to be undertaken for the projects that are in the NWA. these would be 360 additional projects. And Madam Speaker, we have not expanded the staffing, especially in the procurement department of the NWA. So you can imagine that the bureaucracy to deliver, and this, Madam Speaker, is not, I mean, there is a, you know, people would want to put blame at the feet of the NWA, and maybe there is blame to be put there, but the truth is, Madam Speaker, that our system that we have created, we have put on these laws which are necessary for accountability and necessary to ensure integrity of the process, that we have to perfect them, we have to carry them through and follow them through. And it means that it will elongate the process of implementation and delivery. Because, yes, but the issue, Madam Speaker, is that whilst the member will stand here and ask, why is it taking so long? If anything were to go wrong, the same member who is a member of the PAAC would probably be the first to interrogate, scrutinize, and accuse. So the government has no choice but to follow through. But a part of the problem as well is that there could be strategic ways which would be in keeping with our procurement law that would accelerate the process, which could be, for example, having framework agreements or having all the contracts clustered. But the truth is, Madam Speaker, that all MPs would want to have a certain level of control over the works that is happening in their area. And they would want to, and for good reason, some MPs, by virtue of the performance of some contractors, would prefer to have particular contractors operate in their areas. And so, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, anyway, but the points are that we have had to splinter the contracts. There are 360 contracts by virtue, just the nature of it. And these contracts, Madam Speaker, when they are implemented, will have a major impact on our local roadways. But this is not the subject of, of this presentation. But to answer the member's direct question, which is, will this be elongated? If you notice, Madam Speaker, we have strategically placed the value of the contracts at a particular threshold, which means that more expedited procedures can be applied to ensure that these projects get done and the benefit is delivered to the people in the constituency. So this is under a particular threshold, and therefore it can be expedited quickly. Madam Speaker, the question was asked about what would the phase 2 project look like and what would be the budget. We're still putting together that budget, but the phase 2 project will do what the leader of the opposition had mentioned, that there are constituencies that have housing developments. Some of these housing developments are not under the NHT or the HAJ. Some of them were built by the housing department at the time, Ministry of Housing. And so they don't really have a parent body that is overseeing them. They were social housing, they were given or sold or let to the persons occupying them, and they have now reached their useful life. Some of these houses were built, they were built to last 50 years. Some of them are over 50 years now. Not that they are going to collapse, but if they are not addressed, they probably will cause harm to the people occupying them. So in the second phase, we're going to be looking at several of these communities. Now already, we have asked the NHT to take on a few of them, a few of the larger ones, and they are working on those. Several MPs in here will be benefiting from that. But there are some smaller communities and particular buildings that need attention. So in the second phase, we'll be looking at that. We'll be making a special budgetary allocation and looking at that. We will be also expanding the removal of zinc fences and the dangerous properties. this area might be a little tricky because the properties may exist on, the buildings may exist on private property, but the truth is where these buildings form a public hazard, we have to engage a legal process and the local authority and see to their removal for the safety of the public. There are several communities where we have to reinstate the sidewalk, continue with zinc fence removal, establishment of proper parks for the communities. So it will really be very much urban focused, including where possible correcting sewage problems that may exist. So it will be fairly substantial and highly focused on urban problems and therefore urban communities. Madam Speaker, I think I would have answered all the questions asked. I thank members and I thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Announcements.
Also laid on the table of the House today are 1. Government of Jamaica National Natural Disaster Risk Financing Policy, White Paper number 2 of 2023, dated June 2023. And 2, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Policy and Guidelines for Public Facilities, specifically for schools and hospitals, dated June 2023, from the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport.
House Leader, adjournment. House Leader, adjournment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, at this point, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. But I'd like to use the opportunity to thank the members for coming out to Parliament at such short notice. And so, on the adjournment at this time, I therefore ask that the House adjourns until Tuesday, July 4, 2023 at 2 p.m.
The question is that the House do now adjourn for our next meeting date of Tuesday, July 4, 2023 at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned.